Google's smart bidding strategies, max clicks, max conversions, target ROAS, and target CPA, common myths and mistakes associated with them, and what you should do. That's coming up next. Hey, welcome back, guys. If you're new around here, my name is Dean Hua. I'm a digital advertising strategist focused on paid media, and I work with a lot of local businesses to help improve their lead generation and attract new customers. And the content on this channel reflects that. So we have a really great episode today. In fact, this is actually part 1 of 2. It was so long that I actually break it up into 2 different parts. Part 2 will drop in a couple of days. But part 1 is a roundtable discussion with 3 highly experienced media buyer friends of mine, focused on smart bidding strategies and everything you want to know and what you should do and what you should avoid. All of 3 of them have been in the Google advertising game for a while now, highly experienced, and what I'm going to do is actually moderate this roundtable discussion, and we're going to talk about the myths, mistakes, and opportunities associated with Google's smart bidding strategies: max clicks, max conversions, target ROAS, and target CPA. I believe that covers the main ones. So I've been in Google advertising for the better part of 6 years now, and for these last 6 years, whenever I take on an existing account that's either been managed by another agency or maybe has been done by a DIY business owner who's new to Google, I see a lot of mistakes being made with Google's smart bidding strategy platform. So I think that this is going to be a really good roundtable discussion where you guys can kind of learn from 3 other highly experienced media buyers and really understand what it is and what it isn't, what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And then part 2 will be a roundtable discussion where we talk about predictions and trends for the pay-per-click marketing industry in 2021. Not necessarily just Google ads, but we'll talk a little bit about Facebook and LinkedIn ads as well as how we are adjusting to the Facebook / iOS 14 changes as well. So look for part 2 to drop in the next couple of days, and I'll link it in the description and comment section. And before we dive in, quick apologies for the audio on the Zoom. My audio wasn't the best setup at that time. I've since adjusted something a lot more better than what we had a month ago. So apologies for that. And also a quick question of the day for you guys. Once you've watched this video, let me know in the comment section what you would like to see me cover regarding Google's smart bidding strategies moving forward. So let me know in the comment section what sort of questions you have or topics you'd like to see, and I will certainly consider that moving forward. So with that said, let's just dive right into this roundtable discussion. See you soon. Bye. Why don't we start off with introductions, just real quickly, who you're with and how long you've been in the industry. Let's go from left to right. So Ed, Tom, and then Amy. Ed?
Yeah, so my name's Ed Goss. I'm managing director and owner of 10,000 Foot View. And I started my agency in 2013 after having the aha moment about Google Ads and the opportunity that it presented for small business. Started out as essentially a freelancer, as many of us did, and grew from there.
All right. Tom?
Yes, I'm Tom Beckerly. I am the digital marketing manager at JWeb Media. I started in the industry in 2008, but I really didn't get into the management side of it until 2016. So yeah, but that's where I'm at.
All right, I'm Amy Hebden. I have been doing Google Ads / AdWords since 2004. And in 2017, I launched Paid Search Magic along with my husband and business partner. So we've been managing, running our own agency since late 2017.
Awesome. So let's just dive right in here. I've been in pay-per-click marketing for like the last 6 or 7 years. And like all of you who are veterans, we've seen a lot of stuff come and go. I want to dedicate a big portion of this show to smart and automated bidding strategies, just because I feel like there's so much to discuss. My first question, and this is for Amy, but Ed and Tom, feel free to just chime in here. What do you think is like the biggest myth or misconception that people have about smart bidding strategies?
Okay, that's a good question. Myth and misconception are different, right? I think that the biggest misconception is that if you have the right bidding strategy, or if you can automate something, that means you don't have to do the work of building out a strategy to decide on the strategy. You need to know what you're trying to accomplish. And so many times people just say, what bidding strategy should I use? Like at an account level, as if there's one thing that's going to make your account work better if you just choose the right bidding strategy. But without a strategy, are you trying to optimize this campaign for efficiency or volume? What are your objectives? Without knowing what you're trying to accomplish, then just slapping a bidding strategy on it may not even matter, and it can make your account or a campaign perform worse, where the same strategy could do better, just again depending on how much data Google has and what your goals are. So it's really about you leading what's happening and then choosing the right strategy, the right bidding strategy to fit those objectives, and not the other way around. I would say is the biggest misconception, that you can just skip that step.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree with that. I mean, it's definitely a big myth. One that I would kind of hone in on, which is maybe a little more concise, is just that a lot of people approach automated and smart bidding as set it and forget it. So they think, oh, well, if I turn on maximize conversions and just leave it alone, it's going to do its thing. But they don't take into account that they've got a budget that's set way too high, and suddenly, their cost per conversion just like goes through the roof, and they blow through all of their budget. So to me, I mean, that's just something we see over and over getting into client accounts, that, they've turned something on and they've just left it and never really made adjustments or tweaked, or, as you said, kind of thought through the overall process of strategizing the campaign and goals.
Okay.
Can I say one thing that I've seen come up quite a bit, and actually just on the side, we're in my business, we're going through audit month right now. So we have a lot of people who are kind of going, walking together. We just finished up account settings, and something kind of reminded me that I didn't realize how many people didn't know is that each time you change your bidding strategy or your attribution model, each time you change either one of those, Google essentially resets, right? And so all the learning that you have through the quarters and the years up until then, it kind of manages to forget how to interpret a signal, how to interpret what's going to work for you. And that is the reason that if you have an account strategist, like a Google rep, every single quarter they give you different advice. Well, you need to switch to this strategy, you need to switch to that. Because during that period that you've switched strategies, it resets to zero. And so things that would never work, never will work, all of a sudden they're relearning, and so they're spending a crazy amount of money to be able to get to the point where they can optimize. And so during those first 2 or 4 weeks, it's completely inefficient. And so if you're constantly changing strategies, that is going to be a big problem. It doesn't even matter which strategy it is, it's just you're changing is the problem. And so you do want to make sure that, again, not only are you strategic, I'm not saying you can't ever change, but there has to be a reason. You can't just change because your Google rep told you, because they're incentivized and they get a bonus to tell you to change. And so just being consistent itself is a good strategy to have. Whatever you set it up with, like being willing to commit to that, is going to be better for your account than if you're constantly changing just for the sake of it.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. And I'd also say the same goes for budgets. Changing your budgets very frequently, or even changing if you're doing ROAS bidding and changing that on a frequent basis. Any of those types of changes are going to cause a disruption in performance, and you're going to need to wait the 2 or 3 weeks for it kind of reset, particularly if you have, an attribution model different than last click. That, I mean, oftentimes you need to like look back in time like 3 or 4 days before the current day in order to get accurate reporting, right? If you're looking at current data, you're not getting all those conversions, they haven't backfilled. And it's a big problem with a lot of clients, because they just, they want to change all the time. And so a lot of times our job is to kind of rein them in and say, look, we need stability in your account. That's what's going to cause us to improve your performance month over month. It may be incremental, it may not be huge. By kind of dialing in what your business strategy is, aligning your goals with budget with that, that's how you get better performance. It's not by like constantly changing on a dime every day.
Do you think that their desire to constantly change, which is a symptom of not wanting to commit, do you think a lot of it's just like uneducated, just them being uneducated, or maybe it's them being what's the word I'm looking for? I guess just really nervous. Because I had
fear. Yeah, fear drives it, because if you make a change to an account and 2 weeks go by and they're, you've got a target ROAS of 400% and it's coming in at like 250, the client's going to be very uneasy and like, hey, like whatever change you made isn't working. So it is important to educate your clients, but even when you tell them that, I mean, you're a small business owner, particularly in today's environment, like you can't wait for 2 months, right?
Yeah.
For things to kind of sort themselves out. So, it's a tricky situation in some cases, depending on the client.
Okay. Sort of a follow-up, and maybe you guys kind of touched on this, but in your experience, what's the singular biggest mistake with smart bidding strategies?
Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I think changing too frequently is a big mistake. But I would say just the, I guess the consequence of what I was saying before, like just not knowing what you're doing, not understanding how a bidding strategy works. Like I think so many times like, oh, well, we'll just let the data decide. And I try to remind people like data doesn't make decisions. We make decisions based on how we understand the data to be working. And so if we're just giving Google access to decide whatever it wants, we're not setting ourselves up for success. And so it's much less about choosing the right bidding strategy than it is, having a strategy yourself. But the biggest mistake is that no one does that. They're like, okay, cool, but what's the right bidding strategy? Like everyone just like wants to like blow past that and get the one true bidding strategy that's going to help them. And that's just not how it works.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I would say along those lines is just choosing the wrong strategy, right? So a client that definitely wants to have a consistent target CPA, choosing max conversions because it sounds good. It's like, oh, well, if I choose max conversions, that's going to get me like tons of conversions, like really inexpensively. Well, no, it's going to be dependent on where your budget's set, right? So higher budget means you're going to be paying more per conversion. But again, a lot of clients or DIYs, they don't educate themselves. So, first things first, what's your business goal? What's your budget? And then kind of work back. And if the client says, hey, we don't have a fixed budget, as long as we hit a certain cost per conversion, we're happy, then you do TCPA. But that for me, like just choosing the wrong bidding strategy or constantly switching, as we kind of talked about already, is a big problem.
Yeah, I had actually just went through an audit, small e-commerce shop, and I was looking through his change history. He was using Target ROAS, and he was changing his bid strategy. I'm sorry, not the bid strategy, but he was changing his bid or his ROAS once every 3 days. And I was like, no, that's not how you do it. Like you got to give it a couple of weeks to, or even longer than that, to see any sort of significant change.
Well, and also fundamentally, target ROAS should be arrived at by understanding what margin you need to make on your products, and then deciding, okay, well, what's my cash flow situation? What's going to be my average client lifetime value? And then balancing those things to arrive at a TROAS that drives business and drives volume. But at the same time, you don't run out of cash because you're financing these initial orders. So we have that conversation a lot with our shopping clients, and you'd be surprised how many people just don't get that. And it takes a lot of kind of discussion to kind of drag the right data out of them.
Okay.
You can also use that. I mean, and again, not to slap Google for everything they recommend to you, but we found success, as using their recommendation as a starting point and kind of going from there, right? And seeing, good results from. But no, I mean, great point. I mean, if you're, especially with some of the people we see, 300% is not going to cut it, right? Especially you figure cost per acquisition, and everything that's involved with, what their margins are. So, but like I said, based on account data, we've seen some good come out of the recommendations.
Okay. Let's get a bit more granular here. So let's talk about local lead gen, for example. Tom, is there a particular bid strategy that you'd like to work with when you first start out?
So, I will, build conversions first, right? I mean, you got to have everything in place to be able to measure that. And I'm surprised, I guess, by how many accounts you get into and you don't have a dynamic number insert. You're not tracking form submissions. So, once I get that data, then, we can get it into CPA bidding, which is where we kind of find our most success with. But again, like I said, not being able to measure conversions, I think, is the biggest problem that I run into. But target CPA is what we see the most success with for local lead gen anyway.
Ed or Amy?
I don't do a lot of local lead gen, but I mean, I think Tom's point is true no matter what the industry is, that if you don't have the conversion data, you're not going to get good success with just telling Google to then, either you picked a target CPA or you picked, they don't know what drives conversions yet for you, or, what drives viable conversions for you. So you can't really expect them to use like their secret signals if they don't have any actual data. So getting that first before you then say to optimize based on this is usually like the precursor to then, putting that strategy into place.
Yeah, further to that, I'd just say, if we start with a net new campaign, like a brand new account, obviously you have to have your conversion goals set up, whether you're using analytics or however you're going to do that. But we'll usually start out with manual bidding or ECPC when we don't have any data. And we'll run that for, it kind of depends on, what the ad spend is and what the volume of conversions are. So we'll run that for, let's say, at least a couple of weeks, maybe even could be a couple of months, until we establish a good baseline of conversion volume. And in that time, you're then taking the opportunity to dial in your creative and your keyword strategy. And then you're preparing yourself to kind of switch over to typically TCPA with lead gen, because usually there's sensitivity around the cost per lead more so than volume of leads, like get as many as possible for this budget. So we kind of fall in the same boat that TCPA is where you're going to end up, but you may not start there.
Okay. Have you found, I think Google suggests 30 to 50 conversions within a 30-day rolling period. Have you found that to be more or less the benchmark before you start to switch over?
We used to target 100 a couple years ago, and as Google's AI has improved, we've slowly ratcheted that down, and we kind of work with 25 now is kind of our magic number, and that may be different again 6 months from now. And that's not to say that 25 is always going to work, because there's a lot of variables, but it's a point where it's likely to work and it's worth testing at that point.
Okay. Yeah. So has anyone had success with max conversions? Like, I've tried a couple of times. I've never been able to like get it to work. I'm wondering if you had success, under what conditions?
Yeah, we run it when clients definitely, like, they say, this is my budget, this is what I want to spend, and do whatever you can within this, $1,000 a day or whatever the amount is. Then running max conversion makes the most sense, because you're going to drive the maximum number of conversions. If you do TCPA, you may be hitting your budget for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden it dries up, right? And now, okay, we're spending half of what we're supposed to be spending. So it definitely makes sense when a client has a fixed budget. Is that going to always work better than doing, ECPC bidding? Not necessarily. And that, again, goes back to like, what's your volume, right? Definitely if you have hundreds of conversions a month, max conversion should almost always outstrip manual bidding.
Okay.
By the way, that goes to maximize conversion value as well.
Okay. Going back to target CPA, Amy, like, what's your best advice or trick that you have with TCPA?
The best advice or trick for it. I guess my best advice is to make sure you know your numbers, and then make sure you know what the next step is if you're not able to hit it, because volume and efficiency are always at odds. And so you have to be able to have that conversation with your client or know what they want to do. If we're not getting enough volume, should we raise the target CPA? If this thing is happening, how should we handle this thing? Because to the point that it's not set it and forget it. What does that mean? It means you have to re-examine how it's working and make decisions based on that. And when we're seeing that it's not working, that there's signs of trouble, usually we have to make decisions about, are we going to go ahead and raise the target CPA, or is that actually the maximum? We have to do something else and reapproach something else. So it's just understanding what your goals are, and then what you're going to do when those goals aren't hit, to be able to make a solid plan for how you deal with that.
Okay. Ed and Tom, do you have like your best advice or trick for target CPA?
Well, so it's in high competition, getting creative and again, this kind of goes without saying, obviously, with everybody here, but getting creative with, longer tail keyword searches that, can get some wins for you, right? Because, again, we've got industries where the cost can get away from us, where we're at 100, 150 per act, which is still profitable for the client because, they're in insurance restoration or what have you. But being creative with, those types of, risks for searches, stepping outside of the box and getting creative with searches and different ads is something we need to try to wrangle it in. And what I see a lot of is just service near me, right? Everybody gets lazy and service near me, and that's your go-to. And you're not going to win the competition game at Google with that. So that's where we try to be creative.
Okay.
I do have a trick, which is, I don't know if it's a trick or not, but using portfolio bidding strategies, it's a really underused feature. So if you have, 15 campaigns that are all just different geographies, or you might have like topical search versus branded versus display, using a portfolio bidding strategy will, hopefully arrive at an average TCPA that you're target across all of those campaigns. So any one campaign might have like a much better or a much worse TCPA or actual yielded CPA than what your average target is. But overall in your account, you will come out on top. And so what that can do is it can give like lagging campaigns an opportunity to actually spend. And then that campaign in turn, by driving some conversions, can start to optimize, right? Versus kind of a dead fish campaign where it's like, okay, we get 3 conversions a month, it's never going to do anything. The portfolio bidding strategy can kind of kickstart that and get it kind of in the game.
Okay.
I think that's a really good point, especially, when you kind of line item out how the campaigns are performing, you're going to have more efficient and less efficient campaigns. And if you have an aggregate, overall, we need our target CPA to be this. I've seen sometimes marketers are afraid of letting any particular campaign have a higher CPA than that. And so if you can just kind of get in the mindset of like, aggregate in total, this is what we're going for. And it's okay if this is a little bit above because this is way below, and they're going to average out to be okay. Because otherwise it's just too conservative. You're not going to hit your targets in terms of volume.
Okay.
Yeah. It's akin to like having, 4 different marketing channels, right? And saying, well, this one, the cost per conversion is too high. But if you cut off everything, then you just don't have any volume anymore, right? So you got to kind of compromise.
Okay. So back in November, 2 months ago, back in November 2020, Google started proactively promoting and encouraging advertisers to use broad match with smart bidding. I know it's only been 2 months. Have any of you guys experimented with that at all? And if you haven't, would you, I guess, trust Google enough to try experimenting with that? I know we all have our trust issues with Google Ads.
I have not tried it. I have no interest in trying it. I mean, even with all the match types that we're using that are not broad, we're still seeing way too many variations and not enough search term data, and everything is just already not working. Like there's no reason to make that, shoot yourself in the foot and make it even harder by going broad. I just don't see an advantage to doing that.
Yeah, getting searches for red roof and for roofing companies is not uncommon when testing broad match for. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, my take is it may work, but the way it will work is by increasing ad spend. So, if you're using Target ROAS or something like that, and you add a bunch of keywords that are broad, you're just going to see Google flagging your campaign and saying, oh, you're spending $200 a day, you should be spending $1,400 a day. And you're just like, okay, maybe it can still turn in a decent number. But the problem is you've now kind of lost control of your keywords, right? You've just kind of got like 4 broad match keywords that are driving 95% of your clicks and conversions. And where do you go from there, right? So I think it's a big problem. And it's also a problem for us partner agencies that are trying to achieve this 70% OptiScore goal across our accounts when, as of just yesterday, 7 of our accounts got flagged for this, and our aggregate score dropped 7 points overnight.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah,
so that's, you know, while Google's trying to push us into doing this, and now at the same time, you know, they're just going to start flagging our accounts with a whole bunch of issues all at once. And it's like, well, how do we, you know, keep the numbers up? Like, we're not just going to like automatically be button pushers.
nope. And we're good. You know, it's our job to be good stewards of our client spend too, right? And to, you know, to let that get away with that, just to, you know, to maintain, you know, partner status, and, you know, I hope something comes of it.
Yeah, I mean, I joked with a couple of friends that it used to be years ago where if you had partner status, that was a badge of honor. But I feel like nowadays you shouldn't even like promote that on your website. Like, just don't even bother mentioning it. Not that most clients, at least for me, I've never really had clients care whether or not I have partner badge status, but that's my experience. Okay, so let's switch over to Target ROAS for a second. So Target ROAS and shopping, how long do you guys wait before you make changes? Like, you know, people always say, well, let's let the data, you know, lead us. But what sort of, I guess, benchmarks or signals are you looking for before you start to make changes? Ed?
For me, it really depends on the number of SKUs and the conversion volume, right? So, I mean, if you're looking at your account and you've got 12 conversions in the course of a month, there's not much to do, right? Except worry that, okay, we're just not driving anything. You know, so for me, it's always with any of these decisions, it's really conversion volume. And then the wrinkle with shopping is just, okay, how many SKUs are we aggregating this volume over? Because it's fine to say, hey, you know, like 300 conversions a month is a ton. But if you have 50,000 SKUs and that's spread out, you know, over a lot of those SKUs, Google doesn't have enough kind of data per SKU to make good decisions. So, you know, that's pretty much what we go by.
Okay. Amy?
I mean, I guess I have to say that we're really fortunate with the shopping campaigns that we have in the accounts, because we don't tend to run into conversion volume problems, and we have, for the most part, been seeing really good success with smart shopping. And so, you know, in conversations with our clients, they're usually willing to let go of, you know, let it be a little bit black box. I mean, that's always the complaint, right? Is that you don't have access to as much data, but given the returns that they're getting, you know, it's better than what we are able to get previously, and it's really, really good returns, and they'll take that return, you know, and sacrifice the transparency that maybe they would have preferred in order to get the performance. And so, you know, when you're using smart shopping, you don't have many options in terms of making changes, but it's that trade-off that if you're getting the performance results, then you let it continue to run. And so that's kind of where we are with most of our clients.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of experience, but like I've got a handful of clients on it, or a handful of clients in shopping, but and they have extreme success with Target ROAS. And Amy, you mentioned having some success with smart campaigns. I'd probably test that. You know, being that, you know, you speak so highly of it, so we'll definitely take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, one tip I would suggest, particularly for DIYs, if you are running shopping, if you run standard shopping for a couple of months and then flip over to smart shopping, and actually take that back, it's not for DIYs, for agencies, you can actually take the negative keywords that you built up from the standard shopping and get your rep to add those back in smart shopping. And a lot of people don't realize that. So it is a way to kind of have a little bit more control when you launch smart shopping, because we do have a couple clients where, you know, we flipped over to smart shopping, and even if the performance is good, you know, they'll be banging in search queries and they'll be seeing stuff come up. It's like, why is my ad showing for this? Like, it shouldn't be. And so it's a way to kind of avoid customer frustration.
Yeah.
So it's a little trick. I mean, I don't know if it's a little trick, but we only found out about it 6 months ago as happenstance that a rep mentioned it. It's definitely not something that's well published.
You gotta use that for sure.
Last question about smart bidding, then we'll switch over to something else. Have any of you ever had this question from a client? If everything is automated, why do I need to hire an agency? How do you answer that? I know Amy kind of touched on it in an earlier part.
I could piggyback on exactly what she said, right? Is you need a strategy. This thing won't lift itself. It won't manage itself. You can let Google guide all of your decisions, but your spend's going to get away from you and your conversions are going to suffer as a result. And we've seen that over the course of the last year with just the recommendations made. And we're getting closer and closer, like I said, with machine learning, but we're years out before that's a conversation.
Okay.
Well, and I think it's important too that people understand that, Google is Alphabet is a corporation. Google Ads is owned by Alphabet. It is obligated to its shareholders to increase revenue. They're not obligated to increase performance results, right? And so they're going to be continuing to make optimizations. We've seen this since its inception, and it's only getting stronger, because they continue to have to provide better returns quarter over quarter, year over year. That their goal is to drive spend. Spend comes from increased cost for clicks, and it comes from more clicks. Whether or not those clicks turn into sales for you, and whether or not those increased costs, cut into your margins, that's their goal. And so if they're presenting you with automation opportunities to say, hey, you don't have to touch it, who benefits from that? Largely them. And so to the extent that you can say, okay, well, it's easier now, it may be easier, but did that make it better? Did that make it perform to your advantage? And how do you know? You need to have someone who is at the wheel, who can, who's not just an account manager, but an account leader who can help make informed decisions based on your objectives, based on your business goals, and not just based on data in the account and pushing, start and pause or whatever the case may be. Like having that skill set has always been important. I say it's getting more important as the being in the weeds is becoming a little bit less necessary, as there are these other tools, but it's how to use those tools effectively that makes you good at what you do or not very good at what you do. So I would say that if you don't know how to do anything other than push buttons, then yeah, you are in competition with automation. But if you can think beyond that and be strategic and a leader, then not only do you have job security, but you become more and more valuable as the game, like the playing field kind of levels out and those tools are available to everyone.
Yeah, I agree 100% that it's really understanding how to use the tools and where to apply the tools and which of the 14 different campaign types and settings that you need to use in a given situation. Because yeah, there's a ton of automation and things can be set up very quickly, like, some of the new smart campaigns that Google offers, but that's just not appropriate in every situation. And so the other part is, things change, there's like 30 changes every month from Google, and somebody needs to understand the implication of those different changes, how it impacts your account, what to apply when. So yeah, as Tom said, we're miles or years away from having fully automatic campaigns where you put in your domain name and you're done, right? So, I think we'll stick around for a long time, but our role is shifting from, kind of being in the weeds and dealing with keyword bids and that kind of thing, and migrating more towards overall strategic decisions. And that is fundamental shift in kind of the way that we used to work to the way that we're working now and we'll work a year from now.
Hey, marketers. If you want to improve your Google or YouTube ad performance, I have good news for you. We actually do provide audits for both platforms. If you feel your paid ads are performing poorly, click on the first link in the description below to learn how we can boost your performance and lead generation. And as always, stay curious.